This movie is fucking disgusting and I love it. Let's do it. Cabin Fever is about this group of college friends that is going to take a vacation at, you guessed it, a cabin in the woods. So we have Jeff, Karen, Paul, Marcy, and not pictured is the fifth friend, Bert. So they get there, and later that day, Bert is out hunting squirrels, but when he goes to shoot a squirrel, he accidentally shoots a man named Henry. We met Henry already in the opening sequence when he goes to find his dog completely dead and disfigured. And he comes in contact with the dog's blood, so we get the idea that he becomes infected with whatever the dog was infected with. So Bert freaks the fuck out and just leaves him and doesn't tell anybody. So later on that night, they're all sitting around the campfire, they're telling stories, and they're joined by this random man who emerges from the woods named Grim, who is played by Eli Roth, the director. So Grim leaves, but then an injured Henry emerges. So remember, Bert is the only one who knows what happened and makes them all get in the house and locks Henry outside. Henry then makes an attempt to steal the one and only car that they have, but while he's doing that, he starts vomiting blood all over it. So now the group's outside, they're trying to stop him. He's obviously very sick and infected, and he tries to approach Karen and Marcy. So in an attempt to keep him away from them, Paul throws a torch at him basically and accidentally lights him on fire. So now they have no car, no phone in the cabin, and this movie was made in 2002, so cell phones aren't really a thing. So some of the group splits up and they go out to find help. Jeff and Bert find this house where they find a woman butchering a pig inside. And while they're asking her to use her phone, they see pictures of Henry and find out that she is Henry's cousin. Meanwhile, Paul ends up finding a police officer who goes back to the house and sees the truck covered in blood and promises to send them a tow truck. But this cop is also an absolute fucking idiot. So Karen is absolutely devastated by the whole thing and how they killed Henry because she was like, this dude came to us for help and we set him on fire. So between the night before and the next morning, there's been sequences of Karen drinking the water. So Paul tries to comfort her, but his way of doing that is attempting to have intercourse with her. And he goes to touch her and realizes that his hand is covered in blood. And he notices that she has this gaping wound on her thigh and she starts coughing. So now they all know that she's sick, so they isolate her in a shed, which she obviously is not happy about, but the group obviously does not want to get sick. Meanwhile, Bert and Jeff come back and Bert starts coughing up blood but hides it from everybody. So this motherfucker is definitely that person in a zombie movie who gets bit and doesn't tell the rest of the group. But it doesn't work because Paul and Jeff catch him coughing up blood, so naturally he gets in the truck and drives off. So Jeff is absolutely terrified of being infected and is basically like, fuck all of you, and just takes off on his own. So Bert takes the truck to a nearby convenience store where he tries to get help, where we run into Dennis, who is this weird fucking kid who we met earlier. And in this absolutely hilarious and iconic sequence, Dennis just gets up and starts yelling pancakes and doing karate moves and then bites Bert. You cannot make this shit up. So we, the audience, know that Bert is infected, Dennis just bit him, so now we put it together that Dennis is going to be infected as well. And Dennis's father is absolutely furious, and him and his friends chase down Bert. So meanwhile, back at the house, Paul and Marcy are like, well, we're gonna die, so we might as well do it. But while that's happening, we see that Paul's fingerprints, while he grabs Marcy's back, are not going away, so something's wrong with her skin too. And then in what I consider to be one of the most absolutely disgusting fucking scenes in horror cinema, and a scene that has absolutely traumatized me, Marcy goes to shave her legs and shaves her skin off. So yes, she's infected too. So Paul had left to go find Jeff, and Marcy, after this happens, runs outside in a panic where she encounters Grim's dog, Dr. Mambo, who eats her alive. So while Paul's out trying to find Jeff, he discovers Henry's body floating in the reservoir. And he puts two and two together that the disease is now spreading through the water supply, so that's how Karen got it. Paul is unsuccessful at finding Jeff, so he goes back to the cabin where he discovers Marcy's eaten alive remains. So he goes to check on Karen, where he discovers the same dog eating her face. So Paul kills the dog and then Marcy kills Karen. So Bert finds his way back to the cabin but is still being followed by Dennis's father and his friends. And they manage to kill him, but then Paul sees them and murders them. So now Paul and Jeff are the only ones left, and Paul is still trying to find him, but instead he finds Grim's body in a cave nearby, so he was also infected. So now Paul goes back to the convenience store and steals a truck, and while he's driving, he starts to cough and realizes that he's infected too. And then he hits a deer and the car is totaled, so he can't go anywhere. He runs into that stupid ass fucking police officer again, who is now partying with a bunch of underage kids. And he's like, so much for that fucking tow truck, huh? All my friends are dead now. So he's like, all right, dude, sorry, I'm gonna take you to a hospital. But as he's doing that, he gets a radio call saying, we're seeing a bunch of infected people. If you see any of them, shoot them on sight. So Paul's like, oh shit, and attacks the police officer and then runs away. He falls unconscious in the street where he's picked up and brought to a hospital. And then we hear the doctors requesting him to be transported to another medical facility. And who does the transport? Winston, the police officer, so we know what happens to Paul. So the next day we see Jeff go back to the cabin as he had been hiding in the woods this whole time. And he sees that all of his friends are dead and he managed to survive, and he comes out like absolutely victorious, like screaming, ecstatic to be alive. But it doesn't last long because then he is shot multiple times and killed by a police posse. And they burn his and everybody else's bodies. And we see the police ask Winston if he took care of Paul, which we think he did until we see a barely alive Paul in the lake, contaminating the water, which is then used by two kids for a lemonade stand. A lemonade stand that the police posse then stop by and buy lemonade from.